Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and welcome Mr. Chee Hong Tat, Senior Minister of State, Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Transport. With him, our distinguished guests who have flown in today, we have Dato H.A. Baharin bin Dato Abdul Hamid, the Director General of Marine Department Malaysia, Mr. Chong Tae Song, the Director General for Maritime Safety Policy Bureau, Republic of Korea, and Dr. Heike Degim, Director of Maritime Safety Division, International Maritime Organization. Thank you, thank you. It's all great to see all of you. There's something about seeing a room full of faces, a lot more expressions, and of course it's great to be with each other again today, face to face. Now that said, please allow me to greet all of you. Good afternoon to our Senior Minister of State, Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Transport, Mr. Chee Hong Tat. All our distinguished guests, especially those who have flown in especially for today, ladies and gentlemen. Now, a very warm welcome to the opening session for the International Safety at Sea Conference 2022. My name is Carissa Seach, and it is a great honor to be back here as your host. Now, that said, we all know that the opening sessions are normally held in the morning at host countries. But if you've noticed today, we've held it in the later part of the day. And this is to allow friends from different time zones to log in and participate along with us. So for that, I'd like to say a good day and hello to all our friends online, to all the online attendees. Thank you for taking time to be here. Now, this is the 9th run of the International Safety at Sea Week, which is an annual platform for the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore to engage members of the international maritime community, as well as our top practitioners, to raise awareness, as well as exchange perspectives on maritime safety. Now, we're very heartened this year to share with you that we have over 700 participants from more than 30 countries actually signing up to be here in person or virtually with us. And these will include key decision makers from governments all around the world, as well as representatives from across different sectors of the maritime industry. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, I'm pleased to welcome on stage for the welcome address, Senior Minister of State, Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Transport. Please welcome SMS Chee Hong Tat. SMS Chee, please.
Mr. Ishak Ismail, Chairman, National Maritime Safety at Sea Council, Singapore. Professor Chan Eng Soon, Chairman, Marine Industries Committee, Workplace Safety and Health Council. Sister Mary Liu, President of NTUC and General Secretary of SMOU. Ms. Kwa Lei Hoon, Chief Executive, Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore. Our distinguished guests, including our friends from overseas who are here with us today. Ladies and gentlemen, and also our friends who are joining us online. A very good day to all of you. And thank you very much for inviting me to this year's International Safety at Sea Conference. The theme for this year's conference is Riding the Waves for Maritime Safety. It is appropriate for our tripartite partners to focus on this important topic because safety must always remain our #1 priority, especially as we emerge from 2.5 years of the COVID-19 pandemic. Maritime Singapore has remained resilient. In fact, I would say it has become stronger than before. And there's good potential for further growth and expansion. Our seafarers, our maritime workers, they have adapted well to enhance border health measures and safety protocols, including for crew change and vaccination. And these were developed together with our tripartite partners. Our hub port and our International Maritime Centre played a key role in enhancing Singapore's connectivity with the world and to keep essential supplies flowing, including during the pandemic. We are continuing with our investments for the future to digitalize and to decarbonize our maritime industry. COVID-19 has catalyzed changes in different aspects of maritime operations. Maritime companies were able to innovate, to leverage technology, and enhance their work processes during the pandemic. Let me give you some examples. Engineering companies employed drones to carry out ship inspections, which enhance operational efficiency and reduce the need for inspectors to board vessels. Seafarers gain access to medical consultations and treatments through teleconsultations. And this is done without our medical professionals physically boarding the vessels. Of course, some of these started because we had no choice. It was not safe, it was not convenient for inspectors or for medical professionals to go on board vessels, but I would say that even today, it is safe. They are allowed to do it for health reasons, but these types of technologies actually now allow us to achieve the same tasks with greater efficiency and, touch wood, if in future there's another pandemic, there's another crisis we need to deal with, we are better prepared. So going forward, how can we do more with technology and make better use of technology as tools to help us improve maritime safety? I'd like to propose that we can do so through 3 builds. First, by building enabling infrastructure to enhance connectivity and coverage to support the deployment of future-ready technologies. Second, by building systems and networks that integrate individual sensors and data systems to have a more comprehensive overview of the situation. And third, by building smart and predictive digital services that can extract greater value from our data for better safety outcomes. Now, let me start with enabling infrastructure to support safer operations with an update of our maritime 5G network for our port waters. I first spoke about this during the 2022 Committee of Supply earlier this year, where I described the initiative as a key enabler for Maritime Singapore. I used the phrase Maritime 5G for Maritime SG. Now, to recap, this will be a joint collaboration that will be co-funded by MPA and the Infocomm Media Development Agency, or IMDA. 5G will provide higher internet speeds and bandwidth up to 100 times faster than the current 4G technology, which will significantly reduce latency of data exchanges. And this will enable large amounts of data, including video and real-time information, to flow seamlessly between different digital systems onshore and onboard vessels. The Maritime 5G network will be rolled out progressively across our port waters. Last year, MPA partnered with IMDA and M1, one of the telcos in Singapore, to make 5G available to startup and companies at the Maritime Drone Estate 5G Open Test Bed to develop, adopt, and commercialize drone and maritime solutions. And this was a useful pilot to kickstart the Maritime 5G project. But we are not going to stop there because we know this technology allows us to do a lot more than just test bed and pilot with drones. So through an MOU between MPA and IMDA earlier this month, M1 has successfully secured a grant from both agencies to provide a 5G standalone network with full coverage of our port waters. So with this 5G standalone network, MPA will partner with M1 and interested companies to trial, develop, and deploy new maritime 5G use cases under the MPA Innovation Lab and IMDA 5G Innovation and Ecosystem Development Program. Now, our aim is to achieve full maritime 5G coverage in our anchorages, fairways, terminals, and boarding grounds by middle of 2025. With Maritime 5G as the enabling infrastructure, we can then imagine many more new possibilities over the next few years. For example, we will be able to accelerate marine tech research and development, test bed new applications that can improve maritime and navigational safety. Researchers are looking at projects such as remote assisted pilotage advisory, where pilots can remotely pilot the ship via a shore-based control center through real-time video imagery, providing situational awareness of the vessel. Now with this, the pilot does not need to physically board the ship. And this is not only more efficient, more productive, it also reduces the risk when the pilot has to transfer between vessels. Maritime autonomous surface ships, or MASS, that's the second example. Companies can develop and test bed new systems that enable ship-to-ship or ship-to-shore communication. They can also look at autonomous maneuvers and remote control of the ships. And sensors on board MASS will generate a vast amount of critical data for activities such as collision avoidance and docking. And 5G, as this connectivity technology, can provide a secure, high-performance exchange of navigational safety data. So I'd like to encourage companies to make good use of these upcoming infrastructure improvements, make full use of the maritime 5G infrastructure to develop technologies that can improve safety, that can enhance productivity, and can also improve the well-being of our workers. So that's the first build. Let me now turn to the second build, which is we must build systems and networks that integrate individual sensors and data systems to provide a common and comprehensive situation picture for more effective and safer operations. Now, many shipping and ship management companies have used data to analyze and improve the performance of the vessels under their charge. They look at things such as the engine tuning, crew fatigue management, and so on and so forth. So this is not a new area to many of you. Many companies have also set up vessel operating command and control centers in Singapore to have a better overview of your fleet around the world. I visited some of the companies, and I am happy to say that many of you have already put in place these systems. So what we hope to do is to see how we can take this one step further and to extract even more value from the data. So at yesterday's ferry exercise, MPA showcased a minimum viable product of their upcoming Integrated Port Operations Command, Control and Communication System, or IPOC system. MPA and the Defense Science and Technology Agency, DSTA, are developing this new system to integrate data from 29 existing data sources, covering systems such as MPA Vessel Traffic Information System, the MPA Video Hub, and Singapore Maritime Data Hub. This removes the need for manual compilation, and it will free up more time for the active monitoring of our port waters. Now, with all streams of information placed onto one platform, it will also allow for better sense-making and for data analytics to quickly detect infringements or if there's some unusual development. We will still need human operators. This doesn't mean that we do away with human operators. We will still need human operators to make judgment calls and to make important decisions. But the use of the technology will augment our human operators to achieve even better and safer outcomes. And this will also enable optimized and timely responses, such as the deployment of response assets or alerting nearby vessels, which will improve safety and management of marine incidents. A better integrated maritime situation picture will also strengthen collaborations with other agencies, such as the Republic of Singapore Navy, Immigration and Checkpoints Authority, and Police Coast Guard. I think it will also include if our counterparts from the region because I know we have representatives from other countries who are present here today. So I would say if we can find a way as the next phase beyond what I just described, to go further, even further, is actually to see how we can share information and work across different regulatory agencies so as to improve safety, navigational safety, maritime safety for ships that are traveling through this part of the world. I think that will be the next milestone for us to work towards. So the IPOC system will be progressively rolled out in phases from 2023 to 2026. Okay, so that's the second build. Let me now turn to the third and final build. We must harness technology by building smart and predictive services that can extract greater value from our data for better safety outcomes. The users of the Port of Singapore will be familiar with MPA's Digital Port at SG initiative, which allows users to submit port clearance information to government agencies through one single portal. We are rolling out phase 2 of Digital Port at SG, which includes just-in-time marine services. MPA will also launch the Artificial Intelligence-based Active Anchorage Management System, AAMS, in the third quarter of 2023. The AAMS fulfills two roles: the smart and optimal allocation of anchorage space to incoming vessels, and the real-time monitoring of all anchorages to enhance safety. So as our friends from the industry know, we have many ships passing through Singapore in our port waters, and many also call and stop over in our anchorages. So I think having a tool like this will be very useful, not just for MPA, but also for our users from the industry. So this AAMS will tap on 3 sets of existing data to optimize allocation of the limited anchorage space for any incoming vessel. First, the vessel's port clearance information submitted to Digital Port at SG, and this is done before the vessel enters our port. And this will include information such as the purpose of port call, the swing circle, and the length of the vessel. Second, what is the depth of the waters in our anchorages, and this is collected or obtained through GeoSpace-C. And third, live data of the location of vessels in our anchorage to determine the optimal safety distances vis-à-vis other vessels. So with the AAMS, MPA will be able to integrate information in our vessel traffic management operations, including weather conditions, tides, water depth. And this will be used to enable better and safer use of our anchorage space. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I've given you some examples, and I also touched on 3 areas that we will continue to build on, 3 builds. But the new systems and technology, while they are very useful and very important, we must remember that the most important element when it comes to safety remains our people. Technology are tools, and the outcomes and the results will depend on how effectively we use the tools. So it is really very, very important, it's critical, to build a strong safety culture amongst our maritime companies and workers, and to develop good safety habits in all settings. And as I often say to our tripartite partners, our employers, our unions, and our government agencies, this is actually a collective responsibility. I spoke at a recent event on public transport safety, and we said, I reminded the audience that we must continue to place emphasis on workplace and operational safety. And we must build on our existing foundations and never allow complacency to set in, because this is a never-ending journey of continuous improvement. So I'm glad we'll be launching a video on safe boarding of vessels and also a booklet containing case studies of working in and around water. These 2 initiatives have been co-developed by MPA, the National Maritime Safety at Sea Council, and the Workplace Safety and Health Council, or WSH Council. The 5-minute video will be screened at Marina South Pier and West Coast Pier, because these are piers where maritime shore-based personnel will be boarding ships at anchorages. And I think it's a good and timely reminder for them about what are some of these good safety habits. The case study booklet contains a description of 10 incidents, such as transfer to and from vessels, transport via barges, mooring, and diving operations. Now, each incident will be accompanied by lessons learned and recommendations. I think it's important we don't repeat the same mistakes that were made. And importantly, I think if we can derive some useful learning points and we can extrapolate to future areas of work that we need to deal with, I think it will be very, very helpful. And it's a resource that we will continuously add on with your input. So we welcome inputs from our workers, from our employers, from the industry, to help us, help the WSH Council, help MPA to continue to build on this collection of valuable experience, see how we can do even better over time. So the video and also the booklet will also be available online as a free resource. Okay, let me conclude. Ships and crew form the backbone of global maritime transport and trade. We must continue to innovate and harness technology, not because technology is a silver bullet on itself, by itself, but because it is a very important tool, a very important enabler that will help to augment our human workers to achieve even better outcomes. So we must continue to invest in technology to achieve efficiency gains and also to enhance the safety of our workers. And this is important because we want to make sure that we keep our workers safe so that they can return to their loved ones safely. Singapore also has a duty as a hub port and international maritime center to work with fellow regulators, port operators, maritime companies, unions, to continue to improve our safety protocols, our systems, our emergency responses. And this is not just for Maritime Singapore, but actually for the international maritime community. I hope our participants will be able to share and learn from one another about innovative ways to enhance maritime safety and to use this event as a platform or maybe even as a launchpad to catalyze further improvements. I wish everyone a fruitful time at this year's International Safety at Sea Conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, SMS Chief, for that address. Please stay with us on stage. Our usher will show you to the center of the stage for the launch segment that will be happening next. At this juncture, I'm also very pleased to welcome on stage Ms. Kwa Lei Hoon, the Chief Executive of MPA, to join us on stage. Mr. Ishak Ismail, the Chairman of National Maritime Safety at Sea Council. I would like to invite Ms. Mary Liu, the General Secretary for Singapore Maritime Officers Union. Welcome. While VIPs are standing by on stage, it is a simple process, but a symbolic one indeed, as we launch the opening of the International Safety at Sea Conference 2022. We're going to be doing a countdown, and at the end, our VIPs will be placing their hand on the button to launch this. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure to have you all join us in this countdown, starting from 3, 2, 1. Please. A round of applause. There we have it, all aboard, ladies and gentlemen. If you like a round of applause, as we officially declare International Safety at Sea Conference 2022 open. To our VIPs on stage, we'll be taking a photo right now. So we'd like to direct your attention to our photographer. Please wave, photographers. That's right, the two handsome gentlemen in the middle of the room. Okay, that's the best vantage point we've decided. So big smiles for the camera. Thank you. SMS and Ms. Mary Liu, we'd like to invite you back to your seats first. And to Ms. Kwa and Mr. Ismail to stay with us as we prepare here on stage for the second segment, which is the launch of the two initiatives which SMSG shared quite extensively earlier with you. Now, this is the launch of the two initiatives jointly developed by the Maritime and Port Authority of Singapore, the National Maritime Safety at Sea Council, as well as the Workplace Safety and Health Council. Now, as SMSG has mentioned before, there are two items that have culminated from this joint effort. First of all, that 5-minute video, which I'm sure will be very, very helpful to show us, remind us once again the safe boarding of vessels. You'll be able to see them, as mentioned earlier, at Marina South Pier and West Coast Pier. It's a great visual reminder, actually, of good workplace safety and health practices for maritime shore-based personnel. And of course, later as well, the second item is the booklet that documents 10 case studies of actual case scenarios, and it will be accompanied by lessons learned and recommendations as well to reduce the workplace fatalities and injuries. Okay, so we are now ready. Thank you. Please stay with us on stage. I'm now pleased to invite joining us on stage the Chairman of Workplace Health and Safety Council, Maritime Industries Committee, Professor Chan Soon. Prof. Chan, please. Okay, so once again, this is a symbolic launch of the joint effort together. So ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are, we'd like to thank you if you've been part of this, and we'd like you to join us for a countdown. At the end of the countdown, you place your hands and you'll launch this together. All right, anticipation. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in the countdown of 3, 2, 1. Please place your hands. Safety starts with me. Safety at Sea starts with me. You can give another round of applause. We can do this together, and together we'll be better. Now, thank you for your patience. We're going to take another photo. Our photographers are at the center, so big smiles, and let them know if you want the hands on the spear. Okay, big smiles to the camera. One more with the hand on the spear. That's right. What a wonderful opportunity to be gathered together. So we want to make sure we get good photos as well to commemorate this moment. Thank you. Thank you very much, distinguished guests. Thank you. Our ushers will take you back to your seats. Now, as mentioned, we have opened this conference. So it is a very full and exciting learning session this afternoon. And we're so pleased that we're going to be start this conference with two keynote presentations. Please allow me to introduce and give you some background. Now, presenting first is the speaker, Dr. Heike Degim. I'd like to just share a little bit about her background. Now, she's been with the International Maritime Organization, IMO, since 1993. She's now the Director of Maritime Safety Division and the Secretary of the Maritime Safety Committee, IMO's senior technical body for ship safety as well as security-related matters. Now, her presentation in just a while coming up is on the IMO and the human element. Where do we go from here? So with that, ladies and gentlemen, please warmly put your hands together and welcome Dr. Degim on stage. Over to you.
Senior Minister of State, Mr. Chee Hong Tat, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, It is a great pleasure for me to address you today on the occasion of the Singapore Safety at Sea Week 2022. The subject of my presentation today is the human element in shipping. Oh, it's already there. Arguably one of the most important facets of our work at IMO. This has never been more obvious than during the still ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. Shipping is truly essential to ensure the functioning of the global supply chains, and the pandemic made the world aware of our dependence on shipping and, of course, on seafarers. The next slide is not coming up. Oh, there it is. Okay. The wide-ranging scope and importance of the human element makes it a shared responsibility not only of IMO as the regulatory body, but also for member states as the implementers of policies, companies as providers of the necessary resources, safety policies and safety culture, and seafarers as the individuals who physically operate ships. To give you an idea of what the human element related work includes, I have listed on that slide here some of the most important issues, but this is by no means an exhaustive list. Virtually all areas of the work of IMO have human element related aspects. But let's start at the beginning. The human element has always been an integral part of the work of IMO. The Maritime Safety Committee had for many, many years an item on the human element on its agenda. However, it always played kind of second fiddle to the more technical work of the committee. This was the reason why MSC 92 in 2013, when restructuring the subcommittees of IMO, agreed to change the name of the Subcommittee on Standards, Training and Watchkeeping, the STW subcommittee, to Human Element Training and Watchkeeping Subcommittee, HTW. Now that was not merely a change of name. The change of name also included a change of the terms of reference of the subcommittee, putting more emphasis on the human element. The 28th IMO Assembly in the same year then adopted the strategic plan for 2014 to 2019 and included in it a section on shifting emphasis onto people. Following that, in August 2020, the IMO Council considered a proposal by Spain highlighting that the strategic plan of the organization should have a dedicated strategic direction on the human element, taking into account that strategic directions described areas of special interest for a given period, and particularly in the context of the global crisis stemming from the pandemic and the protection of seafarers, allowing the organization to meet its vision and its mission. This was further considered by the Council at its 125th session, and in between also discussed at HTW 7 and MSC 103, and it was agreed to include a new strategic direction in the strategic plan of the organization. That strategic direction is called Address the Human Element, and this change was finally adopted at the 32nd Assembly by Resolution 1149. This move reflects the key role of the human element in the safety of life on board ships, playing a prominent role in the prevention of maritime casualties. The human element's ever-increasing scope and significance in the safe, secure, and environmentally sound operation of ships has been exacerbated by the pandemic, and the human element has been the focus of joint work with our UN sister organizations, in particular ILO, ICAO, and WHO. Shortcomings in human performance at all levels in the chain of responsibility are a major cause of incidents. IMO continues in its effort to address this problem, and we are striving for full compliance with IMO instruments. And in doing this, their effectiveness will come under scrutiny with each incident that we have resulting from human error. On the other hand, advances in technology and training provisions will offer new opportunities, which IMO can harness in order to enhance the contribution of the human element to safety, security, and environmental protection. In this connection, HTW 8 agreed on the need for a holistic approach across the whole of the organization and requested the MSC at its 105th session, which took place in April of this year, to invite all relevant IMO bodies to assess their respective involvement in the human element within their remit. This represents a very important step towards reviewing and addressing the human element in all aspects within the organization in a more structured manner. Now, this is, of course, a very complicated task, and it will take some time to accomplish. We are currently developing guidelines for the other IMO bodies on how to go about this. They will report back to the committee, and we hope that we can then draw conclusions and develop relevant provisions. In all our efforts to address the human element, the cooperation with the International Labour Organization is, of course, of particular significance. I'm sure all of you know that ILO is the depository for the 2006 Maritime Labour Convention, the International Convention regulating working and living conditions on board ships. The preservation of seafarers' rights in all circumstances, including in times of crisis, of course, is a fundamental element to uphold the shipping sector as an attractive place of work. Cases of abandonment have increased recently, with 74 new abandonment cases reported until now in the IMO-ILO joint database on abandonment of seafarers. This was only during the first half of 2022, so we can assume that this year we are heading towards surpassing 2021's record of 95 cases, which is, of course, not a trend that is to be welcomed in any way. On the contrary, we need to work on this very hard. The joint ILO-IMO tripartite working group, which has been re-established by IMO and ILO to identify and address seafarers' issues and the human element, will meet over the next 2 years in several sessions, and they will address in particular guidelines on how to deal with seafarer abandonment cases and also proposals on the fair treatment of seafarers detained on suspicion of having committed maritime crimes, and also any other topics jointly mandated by the two organizations. One of these other topics is bullying and harassment in the maritime sector, including sexual assault and harassment, and the joint group has also been tasked to consider the matter with a view to providing recommendations for future steps, also in relation to any necessary amendments to the STCW Convention as appropriate. Now, the COVID-19 pandemic, and to some degree, also the more recent conflict in Ukraine, have highlighted the need for quick and decisive humanitarian action to support seafarers as global key workers. Cooperation and collaboration of all stakeholders are essential. IMO's Seafarer Crisis Action Team, better known under its acronym SCAT, was established at the beginning of the pandemic and has since then worked collaboratively with other UN agencies, the shipping industry, and seafarers' organizations to address the fallout from the pandemic. It's now abundantly clear that seafarers and other marine personnel must be designated as key workers so that they receive the necessary support when it's needed, such as for travel, repatriation, many other issues, and especially in times of crisis. If we do not assure the rights and well-being of seafarers, we will not be able to retain the existing seafarers in their profession, and we will certainly not be able to attract new talent to the industry. IMO continues to work tirelessly to deal with the challenges by means of a multi-pronged approach, including policy development, working together with other UN agencies and industry partnerships. 2 UN-led groups have been formed with a diverse membership to address the issues experienced. One is a UN interagency task force examining implementation and practical application of the Maritime Labour Convention, especially during the pandemic, including its impact on seafarers' fundamental rights and on the shipping industry. The other group is a joint action group with shipping and transport industry and social partners, formed to identify key challenges faced by transport workers during the pandemic, focusing on cross-border workers in shipping, civil aviation, and road transport sectors, especially taking into account the experience we had during the pandemic, which did not only concern seafarers, but every other industry sector that has to cross borders. The reports of the 2 groups are expected towards the end of this year and will of course be considered by relevant IMO bodies, hopefully leading to constructive solutions for the global problems experienced. Now, any marine venture depends on people, and if they function inadequately, it is impossible for that venture to be successful. The ISM Code and its safety management systems establish a framework for the management of those marine ventures by providing a structure for the development of safe procedures and systems. It is the organizational failure, even by well-qualified crews and apparently well-run companies, that is often at the heart of accidents and/or subsequent pollution incidents. Addressing the issue of organizational or management failure is one of the key targets of the ISM Code. It is important not only for the credibility of the shipping industry, but also in order to establish a safety culture that safe and efficient operations are ensured. The proposed ISM Code study, initiated by the Secretary General and currently developed by the Secretariat, is focused on the assessment of the effectiveness and effective implementation of the ISM Code and its related instruments and provisions. The conclusions and results will serve as a baseline for any regulatory exercise that the organization may be undertaken in the context of operations, management, and also safe manning, with a view to responding to the needs for a safe, secure, environmentally sound, efficient, and sustainable shipping industry. The active engagement of all member states, the shipping industry, and international organizations to provide data and other support and promote recommendations resulting from the research will be fundamental to ensure the success of the study. And I hope that Singapore, as one of the most active IMO members, will take a very active interest in this important project. And I'm encouraged in this by the remarks of the Senior Minister of State emphasizing earlier the need for a safety culture in shipping. This is my last slide now. We recognize the transitions that are occurring in the maritime industry at the current time. This includes decarbonization, automation, digitalization, and the resulting need to ensure that these are just and equitable transitions that leave no one behind, especially no IMO member states, and that seafarers from all countries have the right skills and training to continue to contribute to global trade. The forthcoming review of the STCW Convention and Code will provide an opportunity to consider the requirements as shipping transitions to become more sustainable, with the introduction of new fuels, for instance, to meet emission targets, and the increasing use of new technologies. Maritime professionals must be trained to the high level of skills needed for this transition, and this will require concerted and collaborative efforts. The maritime professional of the future will need new and different skills than in the past. We must rise to the challenge and create a workforce that will operate the green ships of the future safely and securely. Matters such as facilitating mandatory seagoing service requirements for certification of seafarers, assurance of quality onboard training, and the introduction of flexibility for revalidation of seafarers' certificates to cope with the challenges faced during exceptional circumstances are also expected to become key elements of this review. The proper manning of ships and its significant contribution to preventing fatigue and safeguarding seafarers' mental health is another important issue to consider. On the other hand, attractive working conditions, contracts and wages, as well as appropriate seafarers' recreational facilities, amenities and services, including social connectivity, adapted to meet the special needs of seafarers who must live and work on board ships for significant periods of time, constitute a fundamental element of a modern work environment. Ladies and gentlemen, maritime transport is the most economical and environmentally sustainable mode of transportation of large volumes of cargo. As the industry examines ways to continue to do this even more effectively and sustainably, we must ensure that we keep the human element, the critical component in this important supply chain, at the heart of all we do. At this pivotal time in history, the maritime industry is contributing to the efforts of the entire world to significantly reduce our environmental impact by reducing greenhouse gas emissions. At the same time, in a bid to increase efficiency and sustainability, the industry has embraced digitalization and automation. All these efforts mean that shipping is undergoing complex and substantial change. This change has considerable repercussions for the maritime workforce, and we need to ensure that it is ahead of developments. It is imperative that education, training, and skills evolve with the industry. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the keynote address, Dr. Degim. How the maritime industry is evolving and, of course, keeping the human element at the center of it all. Now, ladies and gentlemen, at this juncture, we'll be connecting via live stream with our next presenter. He is Mr. Knut Auerbach Nielsen, the Chief Executive Officer of DNV Maritime. Now, he's also a member of the Executive Board of DNV GL SE. He was appointed CEO of DNV GL Maritime in August 2015, and prior to that, he had been the Chief Operating Officer as well as the President of DNV GL Maritime and Director of Division Europe, Africa, and Americas. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased to be handing the time over to him to share more about ensuring safe progress for shipping. Over to you, Mr. Auerbach Nielsen.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. And dear Minister Chee-Hong-Tat Quayle-Hun, dear ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to be here. Greetings from Oslo, Norway. I will be spending the next, say, 10, 12 minutes on a few pointers on ensuring safe progress for shipping. I'm delighted to be here, although virtually, but I hope that you can hear me okay and that you can indeed see my slides. If I could have the next slide, please. Now, the world is really in transition as we speak, and there are tectonic shifts that are rocking our foundation tremendously. Not only political shocks and unpredictable markets, we are all into that. We've seen it every day in media, but also how decarbonization defines regulations and not least the ESG agendas for the breadth of industries. And on top of that, technology and how technology developments really enables a maritime renaissance. And we've heard already talks around digitalization. So I would try to make a point on how all of these three tectonic shifts really have an impact on safety and how and what we need to do to make sure that we can ensure progress on safety and not least a safe decarbonization journey. The next slide, please. Now, as Dr. Degim talked about, and I think it's really important to reinforce what she just said, the impacts of the pandemic prevails as we speak today and this afternoon. And I would like to draw your attention to two issues, namely on the crew crisis, the fatigue and all the challenges that are still facing the seafarers when traveling, the lack of personnel due to the conflict in Ukraine, and not least, I would say, the damage to the reputation of seafarers that we had during the pandemic and how that might impact the outlook for finding the next generation of seafarers and how important that is. But these were all very adequately covered by Dr. Degim, so I will not talk more about that. What we have seen as another result of the pandemic is, in many cases, increasing levels of port stain detentions, especially in the last half year of 2021, but also the lack of maintenance on board several vessels. And of course, if this continues, it might prove that some of the basic safety features are jeopardized as we move on. The next slide, please. Now, I mentioned that we have had a very good development on safety trend in the past decade. However, the last half year of 2021 did not really encourage and reinforce that trend. So we have seen quite a number of casualties and incidents, and actually it has been a record high in the last half of 2021. And as many of you probably think, this could be related to the upswing in business, but I think we have to dig a little bit deeper and look at some of the real concerns. And I would like to draw your attention this afternoon to three areas. And it's basically the hull and the machinery damages. It is also the fire safety, especially on certain type of vessels like the container vessels and the RoRo or the PCTC vessels, and also the fact that we need to look at ship type specific firefighting systems to be able to address some of these incidents in the most effective way. Another issue is naturally the loss of containers and how that might impact safe journeys for vessels in the open seas. And I can assure you that the container industry and the whole service industry is working on that. And also we have newly launched what we call an anti-roll assist app that will help the captains of these vessels to manage the dangerous roll situation that might impact the containers on the upper tiers of the stacks. If I could have the next slide, please. Now, as technology moves on, we can also see a much higher degree of automation. Now, this brings naturally a lot of positives, but also certainly there are some negatives associated with automation. I will not talk about cybersecurity at this conference, but that is also sort of on the flip side of higher degrees of automation. But what I would like to talk about is when we actually experience total blackouts on vessels. And only in 2019, there were 12 total blackouts registered. And you can imagine when a vessel is totally without power, how dangerous that can be if it's not in the open seas, but closer to port entries or in dangerous weather conditions. And it is really a great threat, not only to the vessels, but naturally to the people, the seafarers, the passengers, and not least the environment. And as the degrees of automation increases in the years to come, we really have to make sure that we as an industry look into how we can better prevent and provide proper barrier management to manage some of these risks. Next slide, please. Safe decarbonization, that is what it is all about. We all want to decarbonize, and we really need to make sure that we do it in a safe way. And what I show you here is how the fuel mix of the maritime industries will change over the next decades up until 2050. And you can see that that change is really quite dramatic. Up until, say, roughly 2020, it was all dominated by the traditional fuel. As we are gradually now progressing into this decade and the next decade, you can see how that red color diagram tapers off. And that is really facilitating decarbonization of the industry. The gray part is the use of natural gas as a less carbon intense fuel, and then how bioenergies in the green color and the low carbon fuels, not least with the pink colors, are gradually picking up as we move into the 2030s and beyond. And naturally, electric propulsion has a significant role to play, and certainly for the short sea shipping in particular. But this is quite a dramatic shift of fuels, and you can imagine that that will also set the scene for how we need to address safety in a slightly different way with new challenges on the horizon. Next, please. Next slide, please. Now, these emerging fuels, although it will be a gradual transition, will create new safety risks, both for the vessels, but not least also for the crews on board. And the fact that slow steaming and new fuels could introduce and increase the risk of machinery failure is something that we need to address. Now, if you just look back to last year, about 17% of the new builds in number had so-called alternative fuels, of which gas was the most significant part. If you look at how big that percentage is in gross tons, you can see it's nearly 36%. So the transition is happening, and it's happening to a large extent on the bigger vessels. And the fact that we are not just looking at one new type of fuel, but several different types of fuel that might need to be handled on the same vessel creates a challenge for not only the bunkering, but also the sort of operation and the learning and the knowledge of the seafarers. And there are naturally some technical challenges related to storage and propulsion systems, but not least, as I said, the human factor and how we need to train seafarers for both safe operations and bunkering operations of these multiple types of new fuels. Next slide, please. Now, there's much questions these days around what is the right fuel of the future. And I can assure all of you that the real future fuel is collaboration. And I say that because this challenge that we are now facing with the fuel transition and safe decarbonization is much bigger than any one company or any one entity can resolve on its own. And that's why I say that collaboration is really the fuel of the future. And I brought up a couple of examples here that I think are really important, not least the Global Center for Maritime Decarbonization in Singapore. It's playing a key role in facilitating a safe decarbonization journey. And also, I'm really pleased that there is a dialogue and cooperation with Maersk Mc-Kinney Møller Center for Decarbonization in Copenhagen. And these, I think, are pretty well known to all of you, but let me also draw your attention to a couple of other initiatives. So in Norway, we have what is called a Green Shipping Program, and it's a public-private partnership. It's all about putting pilots in the water and testing out new solutions, new fuels, and really getting the hands-on experience. So it's all about piloting, and I think a public and a private partnership like this one is really a model for the industry, how we can try to develop the so-called green shipping corridors of the future. I would also like to draw your attention to what is called the Maritime Technologies Forum, where the leading class societies, along with some leading flag states, are really looking into what is the R&D activities on the best solutions for a safe decarbonization journey and how we can share that with industries. So my urge and my wish is that we are not looking at this as a competitive terrain, but that we are really looking to collaborate as much as we can to bring the world forward and make sure that the journey can be safe towards a decarbonized shipping industry. And with those words, I would like to end my keynote. And let me just again say to Minister Chee Hong Tat, thank you very much for the opening words. And to Kwai Lei Hun, thank you very much for leading the MPA through a fantastic period. We are so proud of the work that you have done. And I wish that Mr. Teo Eng Di will have a very successful start as Chief Executive of MPA. And naturally, from oversight, we are very much here to support the industry, to support Singapore, and to support not least the MPA and all the initiatives that are driving safety forward for the maritime industries. So with all of that, I thank you very much for your attention this afternoon. I wish you all a very good conference, and I will be listening in to the discussion and the panel that will take place from now. So thank you to all of you for listening in, and I wish you a wonderful conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Aarbeck-Nielsen. Indeed, a safe and sustainable progression and transition, and taking us really nicely into the next part of the segment. I can't help but notice it's really catchy to think that collaboration is the fuel for the future, and that we are all here in seeking out different perspectives, as well as how we can build a more robust ecosystem to work together. Now, in this next panel discussion, you've heard from our keynote speakers, you've heard from SMS Chee, and so now the time is for you to participate and tell us what you think or what's coming up for you in this panel session. Now, you can do that by logging on to Pigeonhole. So there's a QR code on the screen. You could scan it easily with your mobile devices, or you can always log on to www.pigeonhole.at and log into our event code, which is Safety at Sea. The panel discussion is titled Riding the Waves for Maritime Safety. Now, we've heard how the pandemic has presented challenges, but now we've also acknowledged how the pandemic has taught us resilience and the opportunities that await post-pandemic. So that's it, decarbonization, digitalization, and the human element. These are some of the many things that were brought up this morning. So we hopefully will be able to talk more in depth in this panel discussion together. Now, I'm very pleased to be welcoming on stage our moderator for this segment. He is Mr. Michael Poon, the Deputy Chairman of National Maritime Safety at Sea Council. And we're also very pleased to have with us, oh yes, clap please, Singapore, and the Executive Director of Singapore Shipping Association. So I make my way this way. And also in just a while, right now I'll be introducing the panelists to join us on stage. Pleased to invite Ms. Kwa Lei Hoon, the Chief Executive of MPA, to join us. And we'd like to welcome Dato' H.J. Baharin bin Dato' Abdul Hamid, the Director General of Marine Department Malaysia, as well, to join us on stage. Captain Andre L. Lagobin, the President of the Nautical Institute, join us on stage. We're welcoming Ms. Carolyn Yang, the Vice Chair of International Chamber of Shipping and President of Singapore Shipping Association. Along with that, Mr. Andreas Brackel, the Vice President of Head of Environmental Claims, Guardian Committee member, IGP&I Group. Welcome on stage. We have a final member of the panel who'll be dialing in remotely. He is Mr. Arif Toha, the Director General of Sea Transportation, Ministry of Transport, Indonesia. Let's give him a while and make sure that he's online. So I'd like to say a big hello to Mr. Toha. If you can hear us, please say hello.
Hello. Everyone.
There he is, online. Thank you. So our panel is ready. I'm going to be handing over the time to Ms. Michael to moderate this. Thank you. Over to you.
All right, thank you very much. First of all, everyone, a warm welcome to this panel. I have the unenviable task of moderating a very distinguished panel. In fact, quite a big number for the moment. And also including Pak Arif, if you can hear me, thank you very much for joining us virtually on this call. I know that your time is precious, but we do appreciate your presence at this point in time. So I think to start off with, I just want to do a quick summary because I really like the fact that, first of all, I think Minister is not here right now, but I was really inspired by his opening speech. I think everyone have heard the main points that he talked about, which I thought was really good to listen to. And as a Singaporean, I'm pretty proud of the fact that Singapore is investing, pretty much investing in the future. Unheard of, right? We are looking towards 2025, where 5G will be the normal way of how we transport and also put in place and relay data. That's going to be key for all of us. And I'm also surprised, Lei Hoon, thank you very much for your leadership as well and for the community. We're also seeing exciting landscape ahead of us, automated anchorage management system. I've never heard of it before. And then as an executive director of the Singapore Shipping Association, we're always tasked with complaints and constructive feedback on how we can better manage this limited anchorage space we have in Singapore itself. So really very exciting to hear that. Obviously, I think, and I feel for, and I do relate and resonate with Senior Minister Chee, is that he says, while technology is a tool, it is important for us to continue to press on collectively as a whole, to build a safety culture. Sister Mary from the Union, I think you know that. I saw you nodding very aggressively. I think we understand it very well. Dr. Deggan, thank you so much. You definitely have highlighted as what Mr. Orbeck Nelson has mentioned before. I think the 2 years of pandemic have really brought a pronounced state of awareness of how we actually treat seafarers, how we treat them. And it's important for us because I think I just heard Mr. Orbeck Nelson mention about the fact that how we treat them really impacts the future of maritime talent here. If we treat them well, we will get an assured pool of future maritime talent. If we don't treat them well, then I think the industry will be in for the long haul to find the right people that's going to be in place to take us moving forward. And more so from an industry where we are really transporting the world's goods, 90% of them, for the world's economy. I think that's going to be key for all of us. So it's important for us to understand that, and I'm going to be engaging the panel with us. Pak Arif, I hope you can hear me very clearly, that we can maybe discuss this at great length in a short while. But there is really a reinforced call to make sure that standards, certification, including training, should always be in place. And in particular, I like the fact that Mr. Obek Nelson talked about a few things, which is really about the future as well, right? Who would have thought that a few years back that we would have to link decarbonization with safety, right? Who would have thought about that? And perhaps I'm going to look forward to our Vice Chairman from ICS, Ms. Caroline, to maybe talk about it in a short while on this about decarbonization. I'm sure from your viewpoint at ICS, there's also a worldwide view on how we can actually put this in place. Last but not least, Mr. Obek Nelson talked about a few things, which he says that there is a tectonic shift towards what the shipping industry is facing. I think we all agree about this, right? There's so many waves of regulations we've got to deal with. You know, with the impending decarbonization agenda, it's going to be key for all of us. So I think with that, I want to maybe start off perhaps with Ms. Kwan, since you're close to me, because Mr. Obek Nelson talked about a couple of things. He said that in his speech, he said that collaboration is the real fuel of the future. But I also think that collaboration is going to be the real driving factor in safety culture. So actually, how does, in your viewpoint, because I've heard you before, you've mentioned the fact that there was indeed, on the safety aspect and training purposes, MPA did sign an MOU with Indonesia, DGST, in regards to training. Can you please elaborate more about this for us?
Well, Pak Arif, who is with us, I'm sure he will also be able to share that. I think the thing about training, right, is that the challenges that we face within the maritime sector is really not a country's problem nor a company's problem. When we talk about decarbonization, digitalization, and Knut has rightly pointed out in terms of the future fuel, you will see that there's going to be drastic change in the next 10 years, 20 years, and 2050 is going to be a totally different picture from today. When it comes to safety, vessel traffic management, when it comes to anchorage management, when it comes to safety at sea out there, when it comes to piracy issues, and I know Natarajan ED of RECAP is here today, these are areas which requires a lot of collaboration because it is not just within one country, it's also cross-border. And when it comes to training, collaboration with our neighbors, whether it's with Malaysia or with Indonesia, it is even more important because we are the 3 littoral states of the Straits of Malacca and Singapore. So with DG, Pak Arif here, the establishment of the collaboration of training has been especially for many years from now, even before my time, you know, with my predecessors, about how do we bring about improved safety standards along the Straits of Malacca and Singapore, and how do we exchange views in terms of some of the training, in some of the roles and the regulatory functions that we have in this area. But I just want to highlight another important point about collaboration. In fact, when I first joined the sector 3.5 years ago, a veteran told me, shipping, port, you will never see collaboration. It is only competition. And look at where we are today. 3.5 years into now, with the pandemic, we've saw so much transformation and changes, and I actually only see collaboration. Of course, there's competition, but how do you collaborate? Like what Michael, you mentioned, how do you collaborate on standards, on governance? Because if we don't collaborate, we'll never find global solution and will always remain as it is in the shipping sector, and your supply chain will always be disrupted, even in normal situation. So I think for me, collaboration is really key, and I hope that the shipping veteran who told me that 3.5 years ago would now come forward, and I will update him on all the measures we are doing in collaborating together, not just within the region, but also with IMO, multilaterally, and also not just within shipping, but across the value chain, logistics sector, fuel, energy companies. So yeah, that would be my...
I think, Leon, thank you very much. I think it's not only just across the logistics chain, but also across the region as well, right? This being an International Safety at Sea Week, we're definitely looking forward to collaborate across the entire globe at the same time. So to keep Pak Arif warm, while he's at the virtual side of the house, Pak Arif, it would be nice to hear your views in regards to where do you see this collaboration that's taking place in terms of Indonesia? And as you know, Indonesia Crew is a big cruise supplier for the shipping industry itself. So where do you see that that it will take place where training will be important for us, and that it will also help to improve the safety culture across the board where the crews are serving around the world today? Pak Arif, up to you, please. Thank you.
Yes. COVID-19 pandemic has a significant impact to the safety aspect of the maritime transport, especially to seafarers as a key factor of ship seaworthiness. Restriction in the process of crew replacement will cause stranded seafarer who will experience excessive fatigue. In its latest circular, IMO circular regarding the coronavirus, designation of seafarers as key workers, IMO urged member states and relevant national authorities to designate seafarers as key workers providing an essential service in order to facilitate safe and unhindered movement for crew and maritime workers on the process of signing in and out to or from vessels. Crew change facilitation has come in the spotlight of the Indonesia DGST. Indonesia authorities implement relevant measures to allow stranded seafarers to be repatriated and others to join the ships, and to ensure access to medical care as well as other urgent needs. What we did, for instance, is in 2021, we provide 11 ports in Indonesia for the repatriation and or crew change activities. There are in Belawan, Tanjung Balai Karimun, Batam, Merak, Tanjung Priok, Tanjung Perak, Makassar, Bitung, Ambon, Benoa, and Sorong. And in 2022, the number is increasing since all ports now available for crew change and repatriation. From January 2021 up to May 2022, Indonesia assisted crew change and repatriation of more than 5,600 seafarers. In the event of medical assistance and handling of crew change activities for the ship's crew of Indonesian citizens and foreign nationalities will carry out in accordance with the established regulation and WHO health protocols. Moreover, on these matters, Directorate General of Sea Transportation released some circulars. The first was circular letter number 11, year 2020, on contingency plan for seafarers and ship owners or operators due to COVID-19 to address the validity period of seafarers' documentation matters, followed by circular number 13, year 2020, concerning passengers' limitation on ships, transport and port services during the emergency of coronavirus disease disaster management 2019. We keep this circular update, and we also communicate with the IMO so that maritime community are aware of the facilitation. The latest one is circular letter number 83, year 2022, on the guidance for people's domestic travel using sea transportation modes during the coronavirus disease 2019. And it was issued recently on 26 August 2022. That's my...
Parif, thank you very much. I think it's really very pleasing and comforting to hear that DGST has put in place a lot of policies that to help and aid in the repatriation of obviously, of course, Indonesian seafarers. We are really definitely very pleased to hear that. While the Indonesian authorities are doing that in terms of making sure that repatriation is going to be very critical, we've seen it happen in a pandemic period of time. I think the alleviation of the well-being and the welfare of crew, it's important. So, Andreas, we talked about this in regards to alleviation of the welfare. Can you share with us how do you see that the well-being of the crew is connected to the prevention of accidents? You've heard Pak Arief talked about how they're making efforts to enable repatriation and so on. So can you share with us how do you see that well-being of a crew is connected to the prevention of accidents? Andreas.
The short answer is that there's a strong correlation between the wellness of the crew and the number of accidents. So whatever we can do to make sure that the crew are well, the more effective, efficient our efforts to minimize these accidents will be. A mistake is often being committed by a crew member. but it is also often provoked by the environment in which the crew member lives and work. So having a focus on the environment of which the crew members are living out at sea, are working out at sea, and their social relations on board, I believe can be a strong contributor to avoid accidents going forward.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that, because you said that the environment also provokes the well-being. The environment that they work in also, in a way, impacts a crew's performance. Now, since we talk about that, I'd like to maybe shift gear a little bit more, because if you heard before, the tectonic shift of the future is that the ships are moving towards a new carbon-friendly future. So therefore, we're expecting that the operating profile of a ship now will move towards much more high-tech world, a much more different world in how we actually mix the fuel. Obed Nielsen talked about the fact that we are seeing likely some risks involved.
Yes.
And the risk could include engine failure if you look at slow steaming. It could involve the wrong mixture when you're entering the port, particularly if you're going to an ECA area, and so on. So I think that's going to be key for us. It's interesting you talk about that. And maybe perhaps I would maybe ask Caroline, if you can, tell us a few things, because given today's world, the industry is constantly being stretched to the limit, right? With the multitude of compliance, with the multitude of regulatory requirements from the IMO. Digitalization and technology may be or must be the solution, right? So where do you see digitalization and technology impact shipping as a whole?
So, you can see from the pandemic that it was the digital tools that kept the economy going and the businesses going. So definitely when we talk about automation, we talk about digitalization, it is all about improvement of, and it can improve shipping. It can streamline the operations. It can improve the operations. You can have route optimization. You can also even have a clearer idea, but you can have a clearer calculation of our carbon emissions from our ships. So definitely, digitalization is the way to go. Digital tools is the way to go. And it goes for anything from the current digital tools. We have the AI, as well as the digital twins that we see it happening right now. But I have a few things that I want to bring up is, when we talk about digitalization, there are actually a lot of factors that we need to take into account. I think the first factor I see is legislation. Legislation is going to be very key, because we need a very strong, coherent infrastructure of legal framework to govern this digitalization if we want to be truly globally connected. And the governments need to collaborate on technology standards and policies so that we can have a truly globally connected supply chain. That's one factor. Now, the second factor, we talk about collaboration. So collaboration and interoperability of systems. It has to happen throughout the whole maritime ecosystem. We talk about ship owners, terminals, charterers, banks, customers, just to name a few. All of them needs to talk to each other. So this collaboration and interoperability is important. You cannot have the smartest technology on board and you can't interlink with the port that you are entering. Yeah, so that interoperability is important. Then when you have the multitude of systems, then we talk about the safety and the security of these systems. So we also must develop a strong frame, it's not a framework, we need to have a strong infrastructure this safety and security embedded into all these systems so that all these solutions can operate and talk to each other. So these are, you talk about legislation, you talk about collaboration and interoperability, then you talk about the safety and security of the infrastructure of the different systems. Now, when we develop all these solutions, we must have our seafarers and the maritime workers as our focus. They must be our left, right, and center of the solutions that we devise. And one of the main guiding principles is that it must decrease workload. If it increases workload, please don't do it. Yeah, very simple. Now, the last thing that I want to talk is just transition. Because many of our seafarers and maritime workers come from the developing countries. So we need to upskill them. We need to give them the skills to be able to handle this very digital, very automated, and going to be a very confusing multi-fuel pathways of dealing with the engine. So we need to upskill them. And then we need to provide the financial support to the developing countries so that they can come along with us and be automated as well. Thank you.
Caroline, it's very interesting you talk about this because you talk about this just-in-time skills and how we need to make sure that crew must be really skilled for the right things at the right time. And I think it brought to mind and reminded me of a discussion that I had, I think, with Captain Andre or with Andreas. And I would like for you to maybe perhaps share with the audience on that episode that you had in regards to this little alarm that went on in an ECDIS, which became a fatigue. Maybe I'll leave it to Captain Andre to maybe share this and maybe tell us the impact of how perhaps sometimes even with the right skill and the right time to do it, sometimes technology also fails us, and also the behavior of the crew also fails us in a manner.
Yes, that was an interesting situation. I was on board a vessel. The weather wasn't good, and we were together with another ship working cargo during an STS. And the ECDIS, well, let me just backtrack just a little bit because I happened to be up all night on that vessel, tending the ropes, keeping an eye on everything, making sure the conditions were satisfactory. We could go ahead with the operation, but it just required my full attendance. And I was on the bridge, and they had one ECDIS unit, and it was constantly in alarm. And that was okay at first. But as the night wore on, and I was getting more and more tired, and sleep was not a possibility, and I'm listening to this bleating. So I said to the second mate, who happened to be up on watch with me, could you just please cancel the alarm? And his reply to me was, what alarm, sir? I said, the alarm that's going off on the ECDIS. Oh, yes, that's always going. Okay. Does that not concern you? And the honest answer was no. It didn't concern him. And I said, well, what is it? He says, I'm not sure. It's probably a target that's been auto-acquired, and it's moved far enough away now that the ECDIS has lost it. They've lost the signal, and it's gone into alarm. I said, probably. And again, he looked at me and he said, yes, that's probably what it is. But I said, it could be something really, really important, yes, couldn't it? And he said, well, yes, but he said, I expect it's a target that's fallen off. We left it at that, but that ECDIS was in alarm for the duration of my time on the bridge. And that isn't the first one that I've come across. We have the technology there, we have the capability there, but it's just, at times, dare I say, too clever. There's too much involved in it. And it's acquiring these targets and then losing them. and it's generating alarm. And there must be some differentiation between the two, because you're going to get a serious alarm on that ECDIS, and it's going to be ignored.
So do you see this as mental fatigue for the fact that it's, constantly, it's like a constant drone and a hum that you tend to just ignore it, right?
Yes, it was certainly mental fatigue for me,
Yeah.
because an alarm going off in a unit means there's something wrong. Alarms are important.
Absolutely.
But we must look at what we actually alarm. And it is mental fatigue. One shuts out something that one doesn't want to hear.
Yeah.
We're all capable of that to lesser and greater degrees. I think any of us who've sailed at sea for any length of time has seen the phenomena of radar blindness,
Yeah.
where a target appears, particularly with a junior officer, and they really don't want that target to be there. So they mentally get rid of it.
Obviously. So it's almost an alarm for no cause for an alarm.
Yes, but 99% of the time, the reason is.
Yes.
So I think I'm pretty safe to ignore it. And I can't do anything about it, because that means the machine's going to alarm every time the target goes out of a range, a set range, and you can't change the parameters. They're factory set. That was my understanding of it. The trouble is there's so many ECDIS. I think we have something like between 32 and 36 different models. So I can't do anything about it, nor would I, as a pilot on board. But no, when it's a great concern when you see something like that being ignored.
All right. Caroline, you were going to...
Yeah, so I wanted to add in, because I feel that training is key. You really need to give that competence to your crew. And I shared this incident because I'm going to share an example because it's very fresh in my mind. So recently we took a group of vessels to our ownership. We bought a fleet of 5 tankers, and they are the sisters vessels, and there's a lot of electronics and 2-stroke engines, but electronics, and my crew is mostly 4-stroke engines. So, and I visit my ships. So, and I visited one, and it was just as we took over, and you could see that my chief engineer was a bit frightened of handling the engines. And I was frightened because he was frightened. I was worried, and we immediately got some training done for him when I went back to the office. And then 2-3 months later, I went to another ship, same sister vessel. And so I spoke, and I only just went 2 days ago, and I spoke to the chief engineer. I say, so how are you doing? He said, ma'am, it's good. I've been trained. I went for the training is WinGD. I went for WinGD training. I spent 5 days in the training center together with the superintendents. And then the second engineer was an ex-engineer on this vessel with the previous owner. So he said, the second engineer is helping me. And then I have an electrical engineer on board who is not worried about electronics. So you see the stark difference between the two ships. And I really feel that it's all about upskilling them and giving them the confidence not to be afraid. So you need to upskill your crew.
Caroline, thank you for sharing that. I think it's really important to really understand that, and we are very pleased to hear you as a very responsible ship owner to make sure that skills are constantly, training is constantly being part of that ongoing skills for your crew. That's really an inspiration, I think, for all ship owners to follow at the same time. But I want to switch gear a little bit more because Captain Andre, you earlier talked about, this whole fatigue thing. And we heard Pak Arif earlier mention that Indonesia is doing their best to make sure in the times of pandemic that, all the crews that are on board, I know we heard about it before, globally there were more than, was it 1 million or so? 1 million seafarers that were stranded. Obviously they were overworked. Parts of the contract were also expiring, but we couldn't get them off the ship because certain ports were not able to actually allow it to happen. So I want to talk to maybe perhaps Dr. Baharudin. So you want to talk about this? I know that you mentioned before, but I think regarding the global statistics during COVID-19 pandemic itself, more than 1 million seafarers were on board ships at any given point in time, right? Replacing crew and repatriation were very difficult times. How do you perceive the situation in the case of Malaysian crew and ports? If you can share that with us.
Oh, okay, thank you, Michael. Okay, shipping is key to Malaysia because Malaysia is basically a trading nation, and then shipping transports about 90% of what we trade in. So in relation to that, with shipping, therefore the crews of the ships are very important for the transportation of these goods to be carried out safely and efficiently. So this we recognize. But what happened during the pandemic was, if I may recall that it was in March 2020 where we declared the lockdown in Malaysia. And at that time, it was quite chaotic because we didn't actually know what to do in Malaysia on how to counter the effects of the pandemic vis-a-vis the shipping industry. At that time, the government decided that the Ministry of Health was the agency to counter the COVID-19 pandemic. We had this law, which we call it the Act 342, which is actually the Prevention of Communicable Diseases Act in Malaysia. And in that act, it is stipulated that shipping, waterborne transport is an essential service. So due to that, we went to the ministry, and the government decided that for the shipping industry to carry on its activities, therefore that the Marine Department is the key agency to decide to develop the procedures for the crew change and the repatriation of crews from ships. So in that instant, of course, we were doing it on like a trial basis, on what can I say, on we didn't know what to do actually. So at first we decided that okay, because if you remember at that time there was this fear of cruise ships coming in with the pandemic. The cases where there was this case in Japan where the cruise ship was infected with the passengers and the crew with the COVID-19 virus. So at first thought, okay, then we decided that, okay, how do we deal with crew change from ships? At first, we, in the middle of 2020, we decided that, okay, that we prohibit cruise ships from coming into the country, and that we only deal with crew change from Malaysians only. And of course, and we designate certain ports for the crew change, and in Peninsular Malaysia, we designated the port of Lingi as the crew change port. But that actually didn't work, because we had a lot of pressure from ships coming in to do the crew change, and we realized that if we do not arrest the situation, then there will be, as what was pointed out, that there would be a lot of cases where there would be mental stress issues on crews on board the ship. I can recall one case which happened where one crew of a ship transiting the Straits of Malacca actually jumped overboard the ship. And he was rescued by our Maritime Enforcement Agency and brought to the port, Batu Pahat. And he was placed in a hotel for him to recuperate. But that night, the day when he arrived, that night itself, he jumped from the hotel and met his death, and he actually committed suicide. So from there, we realized that this is no what do you call it? This is not a matter for us to, to be playing with. It is something which is very serious, and we had to do something about it. So in the end, we decided that, okay, we would open all the ports in Malaysia for crew change, albeit we work together with the immigration and the health authorities, and gradually we issued circulars, our Malaysian shipping notices. We issued we gradually open up for full crew change for the vessels in all our ports, to the point now that we have recently just issued another shipping notice, which actually does not restrict anymore crew change, where we do not even need the vaccination protocols for the crew to be sign on sign off aboard the ship.
Yeah.
So that is the latest circular, and we have actually opened up to all our ports, and we are also now allowing crews on ships coming into ports for their shore leave. So
Wonderful.
these are some of the what I can say, the how we develop the processes and the procedures for crew change. Thank you, Michael.
Dato', thank you so much. I think your sharing has been really apt, because I saw on the Pigeonhole, and by the way, the audience listening in and also the people that are here, if you've got burning questions to ask, please key it into the Pigeonhole. We'll pick it up from you. But as I was saying earlier on, I think Dato', your sharing has been really good, because it actually helped me to actually answer two questions that was already posted on the Pigeonhole, and one was, shore leave is definitely important for crew. It's an important aspect of mental health. And obviously, I think collaboration will be key for all of us. It would be great, and it's good to listen from the authorities concerned that policies are right now in place to encourage and also support shore leave. And it's also very encouraging to hear, even from Pak Arif online, that Indonesia, the littoral states, Singapore as well, and Malaysia, that you are already putting in place policies that also allow for an easing of crew change to take place without all these restrictions that was in place during the pandemic itself. Now, I think just what I would like to do is perhaps I can ask the support people if you can put out the pre-session questions that was put out to the attendees, and to show the pie chart of the responses in regards to what they see are challenges in the crew change portion. So can we have the system and the people to reflect that pie chart, please? Yeah, very good. So I think, ladies and gentlemen, as you can see on the screen, it says here, which do you see as the hardest wave to ride in terms of its impact on maritime safety? And if you look at the screen itself, I think overwhelmingly, the human element is going to be very key for us. Training, health and well-being, which I think the panel is talking about today as well. But the great portion, the mindset change for good safety culture is just as important. But what I do find very, very much of a surprise for me is that 12%, which is a small pie that talks about COVID-19 and disease X, is being placed as minor. But to me, it's not minor, because I think COVID-19 taught all of us a lesson. We have never realized that something that seemed to be minor in the first place, you all would recall in 2020, it's just another infection that is another part of the region of the world, but it quickly overwhelmed and took all of us by surprise. And I think that the question that was being asked is that what measures are in place to avoid a repeat of the crisis that crew faced during the pandemic when they were stranded on board, because we need to be prepared for the future. So maybe perhaps can I ask Lei Hun, you were in the front line, in the trenches with me when we battled that, so I think perhaps I can get your viewpoint on what do you think would be perhaps the view moving forward for port administrators to really look at to address unforeseen pandemics like this.
So I'd just like to share three C's here. Of course, not cash, condo, nor credit card, nor COVID. The 3 C's here is this. I think if we want to give confidence to our seafarers, there are 3 C's here. First is, what do we do during crisis? To be able to assure them that even in times of crisis, you are being taken care of. I mean, Dato Baharudin has spoken about crew change, and here in the room, we have gone through that period of the past 3 years. I must say it's really darn difficult, okay, from a Port Authority's point of view. But the tripartism that we had in Singapore, the fact that we had such good feedback from the industry players, we've got Michael and Caroline from the Singapore shipping industry telling us and giving us feedback on how to improve the process moving forward. We've got our unions, who is able to also bring back some of the best practices that they have heard. And actually together when we sat around the table, of course we banged table, we chose stones, we throw water at each other. But at the end of it, what we did was we sat together and we came up with a protocol that can work not just to ensure that port efficiency continues, but to ensure that at least what our Ministry of Health is concerned about in terms of public health risk is taken care of. So we came up with a crew change safe corridor. And on top of that, we started to prioritize vaccination of our local seafarers, our maritime workers, to assure that all ships coming on our port are dealing with vaccinated maritime workers. So, and then subsequently we went into CVAX, of course. So I think what we do in crisis is very important to assure our seafarers that even in time of crisis, whether it's about medevac, helicopter evacuation, whether it's about, I'm sorry to say about that, but whether it's about offloading of deceased from the ships.
Yep.
All these play a very important role because having one deceased on board the vessel, and we have to deal with a lot in Singapore during that period. The mental stress on the seafarers who are alive and together with them and continue to work, it is a very high mental stress. So the first C is crisis. What do we do during crisis? And I would say that in the past 3 years, and I know from working with our Indonesian Pak Arif and Dato Baharudin, at least in this part of the world, we have done our best. And in Singapore, being a global hub port, we have done our best, working with the different partners. And actually till now, I would say that we have done more than 320 crew changes. Similarly, vaccinated, unvaccinated, shore leave, all this is already all relaxed. So actually it's not a problem. Problem now is our ships not all our ships are allowing their crew to come down for shore leave. So I would urge all of you, whoever has authority and decision out there, let your crew come down for shore leave. We need to relaunch our economy also anyway, so it's a win-win for you and for us. The second C is really the confidence, and that I echo the point that Caroline mentioned. The confidence actually now with our seafarers is 2 things. First is we are going into digitalization, we are going to decarbonization. Actually, what does it mean to my job? Do you still need me? And secondly, do I have the competency to meet with the future demands? We have heard from a lot of shipping companies that there is a shortage of crew, onshore and offshore, who are able to handle LNG vessels. And you know that not all the new builds, most of the new builds nowadays are dual fuel. And they will be able to run on LNG when the prices go down after this situation. So what can we do to enhance the competency? And we need to start with future competencies, whether it's future energy. So for example, if you can go into ammonia bunkering in Singapore, what do we do? What is the type of competency we can work with our Center of Excellences, with our unions, with our shipping industry associations, to be able to churn and teach? What are the curriculum we can come up with to teach them, so that at least they feel more equipped that, in 2 or 3 years' time, I am ready for it. And we need to start doing it now. And lastly, is really the culture. Culture is very important because culture on board the vessels, there are traditional culture, that's the more open culture, depending on which country and which type of owners you have on board the vessels. And we've heard a range of them. So you could keep to the very conservative traditional type. And for example, in the past, nobody uses handphones, so everybody are forced to mingle. Now, what we heard about culture now is everybody has a handphone. It's good and bad, right? But it's bad because they're all stuck in the room now. And actually, your captains are facing with problems. How do we deal with our seafarers who are not talking to each other? So one culture that I heard on board was that they basically literally forced, during this period and this period, all your handphones the captain will keep in his room, and the seafarers have to go out, no choice. So they have a mandatory 2 hours out, where they mingle with each other. So is that the culture you want to set for a company? Then the culture of how do you handle with sexual harassment? That's an important issue, because we've heard of some in the past where maybe if there's a sort of like a complaint from a female cadet, you'll be like, okay, maybe blah, 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 and then we'll just give the captain a warning. But recently I've heard from another shipping company who tells me, if that is the case, even if they don't investigate, they will ask the captain to perhaps at the next port of call, just come down and have a change. So I think the question is the culture. So for me, it's three things. What we do during crisis, what is the type of confidence we can give to our seafarers in terms of future competency, and the third is the type of culture. And there are a lot of studies now, including in Singapore, some of the companies I've heard, who are doing pedagogy on what is it that you can do, for example, on online training, remote training to your captains, on how you can manage on board the vessels with diversity, with the type of situation that you can arise, and also, you know, new types, new generations going on board, new challenges, new demands. How do you cope with that? So 3 C's for me.
Thank you, Leon, for sharing that 3 C's. It's really refreshing to hear that you've put it very nicely in that 3 little mini compartments in the area. So I want to maybe talk about confidence, because Caroline actually gave a really good example about, you know, the difference between the crew in that little bunker barge. But I feel that it's really a nice nugget to talk about, and also the fact that, as you had mentioned earlier on, we move into an era now that we will not turn back, and that is the usage of new fuels. And it's going to be an advent of a new era now about how we look at that. Andreas, the question I'm going to ask you is that what, in your viewpoint, what are the safety aspects that you see are related to the shift towards fossil-free fuels?
Well, it is not as much as it is now the concern for the marine environment. I think the change from fossil fuels will cause less, over time, less damage to the marine environment. What is my main concern at this point are the safety aspects for all the people involved with these fuels. At least in the beginning, when new technology, you mentioned it, when new technology is being introduced, then mishaps will happen. Engines will break down, we will have blackouts, and we are going to see some accidents, groundings, collisions. And the question is then, how will the crew be able to protect themselves?
Right.
When we have toxic fumes from ammonia or methanol leaking out, will they be able to protect themselves when either trying to fix the problem or trying to evacuate the vessel? How will salvors handle a casualty when they themselves will put themselves in danger of getting close to a grounded vessel with all these fumes surrounding them? How will authorities handle it? Will it be the sort of instinctive, not in my backyard approach, or will the authorities also manage to create disaster plans specifically allocated to the fuel in question in order to take care of it properly? I really hope we will manage to do this, but we will need to collaborate. So again, this is the fuel of tomorrow, collaboration. All the stakeholders need to collaborate. From the very beginning, the crew members will need to tell the authorities or tell their ship owners, who will then tell the insurer that we have a problem. Our engine is not working properly. We need to get that communication going as early as possible in order for the insurers to arrange with salvors, in order to let the authorities know, so that the authorities can do the right thing and actually do something about the problem before it gets too dangerous.
Right, right. And we actually never thought about that, right, in case there's an accident that will take place. Caroline, coming to you, sometime in May 2022 this year, ICS published a report, and the report was called Fueling the Fourth Propulsion Revolution. And that actually kind of showcased why maritime industry must be included in all of this international decarbonization plans. Can you elaborate more, maybe share with the audience, what does it really mean? What are the insights that ICS has shared in terms of future fuels and safety culture for the seafarers?
So ICS published quite a few reports. One of this report is propelling the fourth propulsion. And it talked about the different fuels that they believe is coming up, and that we need to equip our seafarers for these fuels. And actually, they want to, following from this, they actually want to, in COP26, in conjunction with the UN Global Compact as well as ITF, if I'm not mistaken, they came up with this Maritime Just Transition Task Force. And it was the intention that they want to make sure that, because most of our seafarers come from developing countries, they want our seafarers to be equipped to deal with these new fields of the future. So that is COP26, that is last November. And in this November 22, they will come up with a report, and they will come up with a list of skills that the seafarers will need to be equipped to deal with all these fields of the future. That's one. Number two, they're going to quantify the number of seafarers that need to be skilled. So these are the two main points that they're going to do. And hopefully with this report, they hope that governments will use this as to feed into the creation of their policies, as well as guidelines for companies in their decision making.
Caroline, I think it's very critical to really make sure that the industry understand that very clearly, because you're talking about a list of critical skills that's going to be required, and it's going to be very comprehensive. Pak Arief, given the fact that Indonesia is also quite a major cruise supply nation, in your opinion, we talked about and we discussed about the safety element involved, the crew change crisis, how we have to support it. But I think importantly, in your opinion, can you share with us, we know there are many waves that are taking place, but which waves are the most difficult to ride in terms of the crew impact on maritime safety itself? Can I have your viewpoints, Pak Arief?
Yes, in previous experience, there are many factors that affect the aspect of the safety at sea. Of the factors that plays a very big role is the human element, where the supply of crew must be ensured to be available with adequate qualification and training, as well as the good health and good mental conditions and well-being. This is to ensure that each crew members can carry out their duties optimally on the ships. However, along with the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic, several challenges must be faced, including the decreased availability of crew members due to limited crew change locations and restriction on travel between countries. Also, limited education and training for seafarers and ship crews due to the pandemic situations that does not allow physical meetings, while distance teaching is still not familiar for them. A strict rule to ensure that the crew who will board and disembark are in good health, one of which is through the quarantine procedure for a certain period. Seafarers are at the heart of shipping operation, and it is essential that the industry makes flexible arrangement to existing the ship management structures. Seafarers have encountered extraordinary circumstances during the past few years and need to be supported as a priority both today and into the future. Therefore, to answer one from the challenges, Indonesia has held several free COVID-19 vaccination program for sea transportation service officers in 2021 to support the port and sea transportation service activities, both logistic and passengers, to provide protection from the risk of spreading the COVID-19. The vaccination activities are prioritized for seafarers, loading and unloading workers, stevedoring workers, truck drivers, ship passengers, port workers, and the community around the ports. Some examples of implementing technology-based are also encouraged to the shipping sector. For example, the shipping industry can make incremental changes to improve life at sea for seafarers. It is not about transforming the industry overnight, but making progressive improvement. For example, to increase digitalization use of faster port turnaround times, the need for human context is still essential to make seafarers feel connected while they are at sea for long period of time. Also, better connection and access to Wi-Fi on board the ship will help with loneliness and also provide access to e-learning module. In addition, lifestyles while on board is a contributing factor to the well-being of seafarers. Nurturing foods and having a positive and connected workforce will support greater happiness at sea. The digitalization we are seeing across the industry, we need to be ready to support seafarers who will need to be trained to use emerging new technologies. Experienced and talented people remain central to safe and effective industry progress, and it's important that the shipping industry is building a new e-learning platform and training procedures to support the change within the industry. Thank you, Michael, for the time given to us. Thank you also for Singapore for arranging this event. We all believe with the jargon, safety start with me, safety start with all of us with good collaboration. Thank you.
Pari, thank you very much. It's very encouraging to hear that. You talk about a few things, and really, I think the key thing is that we're trying to transform and make sure that the crew is ready for the next level of change that's taking place. But Captain Andre, what about your viewpoint as we ride the waves towards a greener future? You know, what do you believe is the greatest challenge that we will face in the maritime industry on board today's modern merchant navy vessels? You know, Park already talked about it before. You know, what are your viewpoints on this?
Well, my feeling, the greatest challenge we're facing at the moment is a challenge of opportunity, opportunity particularly for cadets. We're seeing, and it's a global problem. Myself and the Nautical Institute and many of my colleagues, we're contacted regularly, or virtually on a daily basis, by cadets who have gained their qualifications, their academic qualifications,
yes,
and they cannot find a berth on a ship. And they're pleading with us. I was working with a young seafarer recently who said to me, sir, he said, please, can you help me find a ship? He said, I'm unable to do this from where I am. And also myself and my family are unable to pay the agent's fees to get myself on a ship. Now, how sad is that?
Yes.
When a cadet is actually considering going to his family or using his money to pay somebody to put him on a ship to get his sea time. And I'm going to make a personal plea here to those ship owners who are developing these dual fuel ships, these greener ships. And I commend you for what you're doing, and there's many of you in Singapore here. Please, you have invested millions and millions of dollars in these vessels. Can I ask you to invest just a little bit more, a very small amount in comparison, in the future of the seafarers on those vessels? And please, every vessel have at least 2 cadets on board at all times.
Yes.
These cadets on board, within the lifetime of that ship, are your captains, your chief engineers, your superintendents, your vessel operators, even your CEOs, within that lifetime of the ship. So make the investment in the future in those. They'll be trained on board your ships. And quite honestly, if you want the best trained operators of your vessels, train them yourselves. You're not going to get any better than that. If you do the training, you will have the best. My goodness, thank you. But I do passionately believe this. We must give the opportunity to our young career professionals that are coming on after us. They are our future. They're going to be taking over from us. And that, I believe, is one of the greatest challenges we face today. But globally, we can solve it together.
Captain Andre, thanks so much for sharing it. I think all of us resonate with what you've mentioned before, the plea to ship owners to make sure that will take place, that we should try to assure more berths for our cadets for it to happen. We're slightly running out of time, but what I want to do is to maybe have the system people put on the screen this very good question that we will ask the panel as we sum up today, okay? Can we have it on the screen, please, if we can get it done? And that is the one that says, if the panel were to choose between efforts towards digitalization or versus efforts in ensuring sustaining seafarers for making shipping their profession, what would it be? It's a trick, almost a trick question, right? So maybe I'll start with Dato. Sorry to put you on the chair on this.
I would say go for both, because digitalization can also be used for the upgrading, training of seafarers. This is something which we actually learned from the pandemic. It necessitated us to innovate.
Yes.
From the normal face-to-face training of seafarers to innovate, because during the pandemic we were not allowed to conduct lessons face-to-face. Therefore, we in the Marine Department, we engage with the Maritime Training Institutes on what would be the best method forward for us to continue training seafarers, because we see that this is a very important facet, of developing the skills sets of the seafarers. So after engaging, looking at the requirements of the STCW convention and all that, then we decided that we would go on board with the online training of seafarers. And this has actually been successfully conducted in many of our maritime training institutes. And also, not only on the training part, but also on the certification part, where we also develop the processes and the procedures for us to do the assessment of the trainees online. And this also we have managed to do it successfully. So I do not think that there should be this dividing line between digitalization as well as the needs of the seafarers, because we can actually amalgamate both those to come up with a successful program for the upskilling and also for the training of the seafarers.
Dato, thank you for sharing that. Can I maybe ask Lei Hun, I know that in Singapore there is this ongoing development at the training institutes in regards to virtual reality and everything else. Can you share with the audience on what's taking place at this point in time, complementing what Dato has mentioned before in terms of supplementing training on board?
So Dato say go with both. I would say do with both, because tomorrow I think some of you have signed up to go to this Center of Excellence for Maritime Safety. Similarly, I think I went down to visit and I was quite impressed, because what they do is they actually use data analytics and they actually use VR and AR to basically simulate situation on board the vessel, and actually they have a module on LNG handling. For example, if there's a leak LNG, how do you handle that? And that training can only improve if more trains in it, because it is a data self-generating model, and with the data that's being imputed into the system based on like 100, 1,000, 10,000 seafarers who have gone through that training, the more the software is better for the seafarers. So there is a way where you can integrate both. And I absolutely echo what Captain Andre said. If we can come up with all this in Singapore, we're going to go 5G, we're going to do RAPA, we're going to do active anchorage monitoring, we're going to do remote. The only way we can do it is when you have the manpower to go in tandem with this. So training and resources must come together. And just to build on what Captain Andrea said, I mean, from the MPA side, we are really keen to work with companies to see how we can continue the work to map out future competencies. And since we are a crew change center, we want to see how we can actually use Singapore to sort of train seafarers on future competency. When you do the stopover, or whether there's some certification, we can do it. And then we can go and seek support from IMO. So any companies who's out there who is on board with Captain Andrea, please come to MPA. I'm sure we'll be we have got some of the officers here. We'll be more than happy to take your contacts, and I'm sure we can work very well together to map out the future competency and start training people soon with our tripartite partners here.
All right, there you go. So as you hear, Lee Hoon mentioned about in regards to this way of doing things. So that was a question that the audience put out from that talks about whether if the panel were to choose between efforts between digitalization or efforts to ensuring sustaining seafarers or the shipping profession. I think you've heard it. They will go with both and they will run with both. And so with that, we're running out of time and we are ending the session. We want to thank all of you for posing your questions online. But at the same time, can you join me in also thanking the panelists, particularly also Pak Arif, who is joining us virtually online to staying us through this whole discussion that we have here. And please give a warm thank you to the panelists here.
Indeed, thank you so much, Mr. Michael Poon, as well as our panelists for that very engaging. I can feel the mood has just lifted. There is hope as we move forward together. Now we're going to be taking a group shot together with Mr. Doha on the screen. So how we're going to do this, could someone guide me, please? I'm an MC, but not a photographer, so I do need a little bit of guidance. Do they look good sitting down? All good? Okay, so this is our official photographer. He's gonna direct you a little bit. The moment I think they all look great, big smiles on the screen.
Pak Arif, thumbs up. Yes. Thank you.
We got it. We made it well. Thank you very much, panelists. Thank you, Michael, as well, for leading us in that dialogue session together. And of course, thank you to all of you on-site as well as online for submitting your questions and making it such a fruitful exchange of perspectives. Now that's it. We are rounding off to the closing of the International Safety at Sea Conference. And as our panelists make their way down, I just have a couple of things. Oh, if you like, yes, a round of applause. One more time. We love to hear live applause, great energy. So 3 things just to make your experience here a fruitful one to round it off. Now, the first, I'd like to encourage all of you to participate in a quiz with us. You can do this whether you're on-site or online. So what you'll be seeing is that there'll be a QR code. And if you're online, there will be a link posted in your chat window. If you complete the quiz, which is a simple 3 questions, if I'm not wrong, yeah, and you stand a chance to win the Amazon gift voucher. A good deal, Singapore $50, why not? Just to see if you've integrated some of what we've talked about today in your minds, right? At the same time as well, the second part of today is that we'd love to hear from you how your experience was and to get some feedback from you. So we have another QR code that will be flashed, and this is the feedback form. So you could quickly just take a picture of that one, and you could take your time to do that just right after this event. Now, for those of you who've signed up for the industry visits that are happening tomorrow, you've also received a confirmation email by now. All you need to do is remember to set your alarms and report here at 7:30 a.m. in the morning at level 1 of Marina Bay Sands. We will have buses to bring you to the Center of Excellence for Maritime Safety and the Wärtsilä Expertise Center. So make sure that you'll be here at 7:30, level 1 of Marina Bay Sands. Now with that, ladies and gentlemen, you've been a great audience on-site and online. So it's been a great pleasure being your MC. I'm Carissa Seed, and I'd love to wish you fair winds and following seas in your journey ahead together. Thank you. Have a great evening. See you.